Have you ever wondered if God, as depicted in the biblical text, could be perceived as a villain? It's a thought that may seem quite jarring, but today, we're going to explore this idea. Across cultures and religions, God is often seen as the epitome of goodness, the embodiment of love, mercy, and kindness. It's an image that's deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness, creating a universal acknowledgement of divine benevolence. The all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving entity that guides us, protects us, and blesses us. However, what if we turn this concept on its head? What if we entertain the idea that God, as portrayed in certain biblical narratives, could be seen as a villain? Now, I understand that this is a notion that may seem paradoxical to many, but it's an idea worth exploring, sparking conversations that delve into the deeper layers of our understanding of divinity. The Bible, like any other ancient text, is filled with stories that are complex, rich in moral implications, and sometimes quite ambiguous. There are narratives where God's actions might appear harsh, even cruel to some. Stories where the line between right and wrong becomes blurred, where the divine actions may not entirely align with our conventional understanding of benevolence. Consider the Great Flood, the plagues of Egypt, or Job's trials. These are stories where God's actions have led to suffering, devastation, and loss. Whilst these narratives are often justified as divine retribution or tests of faith, it's interesting to note how they could also be interpreted in a different light. Remember, this exploration isn't about questioning faith or creating controversy. It's about encouraging dialogue, promoting critical thinking, and fostering a deeper understanding of the texts that have shaped our societies and cultures. So as we delve deeper into these stories, let's approach them with an open mind. Let's explore the paradox of divinity, the complexities, the moral dilemmas, and the different perspectives that these biblical narratives offer. As we delve deeper, let's keep an open mind and explore the stories that could potentially provide a different perspective. The story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood is one of the most well-known biblical tales. This narrative, found in the book of Genesis, tells us of a time when God, disillusioned with the wickedness of mankind, made a decision of cataclysmic proportions. He resolved to wipe out all life on earth, save for Noah, his family, and a pair of every living creature. A daunting task indeed, but Noah's unwavering faith led him to obey without question. In this story, we see a God who is disappointed, even frustrated, by the actions of his creations. This is a God who, despite his omnipotence and omniscience, makes a decision that seems to contradict the very essence of divine benevolence. He chooses to cleanse the earth through a flood of such magnitude that it would obliterate all but a handful of life. From a moral standpoint, this act raises several questions. Was it justified for God to wipe out almost all life on earth due to the wrongdoings of mankind? Could such an act be considered villainous? To some, this decision may seem harsh, even cruel. To others, it was a necessary act of justice, a resetting of the world to purge it of its wickedness. But let's delve deeper. This act of global destruction was not one of random chaos. It was deliberate, calculated. God, in his divine wisdom, chose Noah, a righteous man, and instructed him to build an ark to save his family and a pair of every living creature. This shows a degree of mercy and foresight, a plan for continuity of life after the flood. Yet the question remains, is it right for a divine being to wield such power, to decide on life and death on such a vast scale? Is the act of global destruction a mark of divine justice, or is it indicative of a tyrant? One can't help but question, was this act of mass extermination justified, or was it an act of divine tyranny? Another intriguing biblical narrative is the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt. This episode is a key part of the Exodus story, where God, through Moses, delivers the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. But the path to liberation is a harrowing one, paved with a series of calamities that fall upon the land of the Pharaoh. The story begins when Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, refuses to let the Israelites go. In response, God unleashes 10 devastating plagues, each more terrifying than the last. The water of the Nile turns to blood, frogs swarm the land, gnats and flies infest the country, livestock die en masse, boils afflict the people, hail destroys the crops, locusts eat what's left, darkness blankets the land, and finally, the firstborn of every Egyptian family dies. Yet an interesting detail often overlooked in this narrative is that it's God who hardens Pharaoh's heart, making him stubborn, unwilling to let the Israelites go, even after witnessing the devastating effects of the plagues. One might wonder, isn't this a direct intervention in Pharaoh's free will? If Pharaoh had been allowed to act of his own accord, would he have released the Israelites sooner, sparing his people the suffering caused by the plagues? This perspective invites us to ponder on the complexities of divine intervention and free will. If God manipulates someone's choices, leading to the suffering of innocent people, how does this reflect on his character? The plagues, as dreadful as they were, served a purpose: to demonstrate God's power and secure the freedom of the Israelites. But at what cost? The Egyptian people, many of whom had no part in the enslavement of the Israelites, bore the brunt of the afflictions. Does manipulating someone's free will and inflicting suffering on innocent people make God a villain in this narrative? This question may not have a simple answer, but it encourages us to engage with these ancient texts in a deeper, more nuanced way. Let's now turn our attention to the story of Job, a man who faced unimaginable suffering. In the heart of the biblical narrative, Job emerges as a man of outstanding righteousness. His faithfulness was unmatched, and his piety was unchallenged. However, his life took a drastic turn, not because of his misdeeds, but due to a divine wager. The story unfolds with God and Satan embarking on a celestial bet. Satan challenges God, asserting that Job's faithfulness hinges on his prosperity. To prove him wrong, God permits Satan to inflict suffering on Job, yet forbids him from taking Job's life. This divine permission ushers in a torrent of calamities onto Job, stripping him of his wealth, his children, and his health. Job's suffering is intense and relentless. His body is ravaged by painful sores, his spirit crushed by the loss of his loved ones. Yet throughout his trials, Job never denounces God. He questions, yes. He despairs, yes. But he never renounces his faith. Now let's ponder over this narrative. Here we have an innocent man, subjected to extreme agony, not for his sins, but to settle a heavenly bet. Does this not paint God in a somewhat villainous light? Sure, the story ends with Job's fortunes restored twofold, but does that truly compensate for the torment he endured? The story of Job forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about divine justice and morality. If God is omnibenevolent, why would he allow such suffering on an innocent man? Is it to prove a point to Satan, or is it to test Job's faith? If it's the former, is it fair to use a human life as collateral in a divine wager? If it's the latter, does it justify the extreme torment inflicted upon Job? In the end, the story of Job serves as a potent exploration of the human capacity for endurance in the face of immense suffering. But it also forces us to grapple with the moral dimensions of divine actions. Does allowing immense suffering on a righteous man make God the antagonist in this story? These stories undoubtedly present a complex and morally challenging view of God. The paradox of divinity, the Great Flood, the plagues of Egypt, and Job's trials are all narratives that, when viewed from a different perspective, present a God that is not all benevolent, but one that can be seen as a villain. This exploration of biblical narratives, however, is not an attempt to vilify God, nor to discredit the faith of millions. Instead, it's an invitation to take a step back and examine these stories from a fresh perspective. To question, to probe, to challenge, and to engage in a deeper understanding of these narratives that have shaped human history and continue to influence our lives today. We've looked at the paradox of divinity, where the concept of an all-loving, all-powerful God seems to clash with the existence of evil and suffering in the world. We've dived into the story of the Great Flood, where God, in a fit of divine retribution, wipes out almost all of humanity. We've journeyed through the plagues of Egypt, where God inflicts 10 devastating plagues on the Egyptian people. And we've delved into the trials of Job, where God allows his faithful servant to suffer immensely as part of a divine test. These stories, when viewed through a different lens, can seem unsettling, but they also open up a world of thought-provoking questions. Why would an all-loving God allow such suffering? What does this say about the nature of God, and what does it mean for our understanding of divinity? The aim here is not to provide definitive answers, but to ignite curiosity and encourage a deeper exploration of these narratives. It's about fostering a spirit of inquiry and embracing the complexity and richness of these stories. Remember, questioning is not a sign of disbelief, but a path to deeper understanding and enlightenment.